this next part, I think, is his essential idea about the 4 levels of being. So let me just lay that out now. So the first level of being is matter. So anything that is lifeless, like dirt, like rocks, etc., has the first level of matter, which he labels M. So M are minerals and rocks and dirt and lifeless material. So that's material. That's the first level of being. So to exist at all, you must have at least matter. Okay, that's pretty basic. The next level of being he labels with an X, and that is life. So to be a plant, for example, you are alive in a sense of growth, but you also exist through matter, of course. So you have both M and X. So you're M plus X. The third level of being is consciousness. So animals are conscious because they are aware of their environment. Now, you can say that in some ways plants are aware of their environment because the plants will move a bit towards the sun, you might know. They will kind of tilt themselves a bit over. But that might be more in accordance with their physical properties. It's not conscious. Whereas an animal certainly is more conscious in the sense of being more aware of its surroundings, more active, more processing of information of incoming stimuli, whereas plants are not processing much stimuli at all. So the next level, that's the third level. Third level is consciousness, and animals are conscious, but animals are also alive, and animals are also made of matter. So that's level 3. Level 4 is, of course, self-awareness, which is man, which is human beings, and that's level Z. Level Y, I might not mention, but level 3 is Y. So man is both self-aware and conscious and alive and made of physical matter. So those are the 4 levels of being. So a couple interesting things to comment. So first of all, he says that, this is on page 16, he says that he's going to label the third one consciousness, even though he's not quite happy with that word. And I recall that Aristotle had a similar progression of levels of being. So he had first matter as level 1, just like Schumacher does. Level 2 was digestion, or having needs and wants. Every alive thing has some kind of digestion need. I can't remember what word he used to call it that, and then the next level I remember was mobility. So he didn't say that animals are conscious, because like I said, there's a bit of ambiguity between, okay, well, some plants certainly respond to stimuli. Animals, in a sense, also respond to stimuli, especially if you're a behaviorist in psychology. So you might not really make a distinction there. Consciousness, well, is it? They're simply responding to stimuli. Now, of course, some people throw that all the way up into man and say that we're all determined, right? But so Aristotle, for the third level, just chose mobility, moving around. You might think that's a little bit a primitive distinction. Plants and animals, their difference is merely that the animals can move around. But I think that was Aristotle's third level anyways. It wasn't consciousness. And then the fourth level for Aristotle was self-awareness, which, like, as Schumacher does as well. How Schumacher differentiates self-awareness and consciousness, he says that, this is on page 17, there is something able to say I and to direct consciousness in accordance with its own purposes, a master or controller, a power at a higher level than consciousness itself. So this is how he's trying to differentiate, how he's trying to show that how are we different than animals? How are we different from our pet dog or cat, for example? What Schumacher is saying is that we have some kind of ego that directs and has purposes and can change our way of life, whereas a dog and cat really do not have that capacity. You cannot send a dog to a therapist, right? You cannot change their mental view. You can teach them skills, but you can't change their directness in life. There's got to be some qualitative difference between the capacity for life of a man and the capacity for life of an animal. Another thing he suggests is that notice how a man who is self-aware can be damaged to only be conscious. So you can have brain damage, for example, and be conscious, right? You can also damage consciousness but still be alive. So you can be in a coma. So in a sense, you're alive, but you're unconscious. You're not responding whatsoever to stimuli. Same with an animal, right? And same with when we're asleep, right? We're not conscious. I guess if you shake us enough, maybe we would be. But and then you can, of course, kill something, and then they are not alive anymore. They are now just matter, so they're just a corpse. So he also shows that these 4 levels of being are connected. That something that is self-aware cannot be dead and cannot be not conscious, right? So he connects these things, that these are all requirements. To be self-aware requires you to be conscious, alive, and physically in the physical universe. But something that is alive may not necessarily be conscious or self-aware. He also says that this is on page 19, he dispenses with the argument that a lot of people say is that, well, aren't we just atoms? Aren't we just, how can, like there's some people use this thought experiment. They say, okay, does a carbon atom have free will? Okay, what about a glucose molecule? Okay, what about a cell? What about an organ? Does your heart have free will? What about your toe? Does your toe have free will? Does your leg have free will? Does your lower torso have free will? Okay, well, does your body have free will? Okay, how do you have free will? See, you kind of this reductivism, right? And he says that this is nonsense, and this is his argument. He says that on 19, he says, to say that life is nothing but a property of certain peculiar combinations of atoms is like saying that Shakespeare's Hamlet is nothing but a property of a peculiar combination of letters. The truth is that peculiar combination of letters is nothing but a property of Shakespeare's Hamlet. So he's saying that, okay, yes, to exist, we have to be composed of matter. But that doesn't reduce us to just being part of matter. In the same sense of Shakespeare's Hamlet, yes, is a composition of letters or ink on the page, but there's something that there's something that the summation of those letters creates a new phenomenon that's not merely the pieces that it's made of. It's more than the sum of its parts. I think that's his argument. So we are not just, like if you put us in a blender, right? You can keep all our atoms, but we are no longer alive. It's not just life, and it's just after we die. It's not as if the body, it's not as if you've lost atoms. It's not as if you've lost matter when you die. You've lost something, though. You've lost your life, and what is that life? Because remember, Schumacher, for several pages, and it's actually quite interesting. He talks about the problem of biologists and scientists and they've made no progress in identifying what is life. That biologists have been sticking to just animal behavior and zoology and biochemistry, which I took several courses in, but they have, and I recall even when I did that in undergrad, they were never discussing what life is. They could not pinpoint it down because, again, and this is what Schumacher would definitely say, it's because, well, it's not a chemical. Life is not a chemical. And someone who has just passed away is not physically different, but they are no longer alive. So what happened to that aliveness? Where did it go? What was it? Well, some people might say, well, it's electrical. It's the brain operating with its electrical field or grid. And that is what you lose. Your brain becomes dead. It loses its electrical movement or impulse. But of course, is that a physical thing? Electrons, I know they have a weight, but is that where those electrons go? Well, they go somewhere, but the field has been lost. And that may be what life is that electrical field. And once that's dead, and once that's dissipated, and those atoms are not interacting in that way, then your life ceases. Okay, another point he makes, this is on page 21, he says that the higher forms of being can understand the lower. They have the capacity. But the lower orders of being could never understand the higher. So a plant cannot fathom what it is to be an animal or a man. An animal cannot fathom what it means to be a man, what it means to have self-awareness. They lack the capacity. He also says that people who lack an understanding of what self-awareness is will then tend to demote it by saying that man is not something significantly different from other animals. We are just, and this is what he says here, uh, so therefore to explain life, and I'll quote now, hence we are given a large number of definitions of man which make him out to be nothing but an exceptionally intelligent animal. So this is what when he's criticizing biologists, this is what he says. So this is what biologists do. Instead of trying to understand what self-awareness is, they just simply say, well, man is just an exceptionally intelligent animal with a measurably larger brain, or a tool-making animal, or a political animal, or an unfinished animal, or simply a naked ape. So they're not getting to, and I think, who was it that wrote The Naked Ape? That was a book, I think. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Doesn't matter. But he's saying that the biologists are not addressing the issue, and they're simply just trying to say, we're just a very conscious animal. We're not, and that's the determinists, of course, would have the same view. And he says that therefore self-awareness, he quotes Hamlet's soliloquy about what a piece of work is a man, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculty. And then he says, because of the power of self-awareness, his faculties are indeed infinite. They are not narrowly determined, confined, or programmed as one says today. So again, he's just criticizing the biologists who can't understand what self-awareness is. And so just simply say that, well, we're just sophisticated animals that are programmed. He also notes that, notice the rarity in the levels of being. So matter is everywhere, right? Life is rare. Consciousness is even less abundant. And self-awareness is even rarer. So he also compares the four levels of being to dimension. So he says that matter is merely a geometrical point, as an analogy, and has no capacity to understand anything outside of itself because it's just a point. Plants would be like a line. Animals would be like a solid, a square, and man would be like a solid. And just like if a plant as a line would have no capacity to understand dimensions outside of itself, same with an animal would have no capacity to understand what it would be like a solid, and etc. So you might think of flatland as also illustrating that point. Now you might be noticing here how this is going to lead to a proof of God, right? But when we get there, I will tell you what I think about that.